The sign was right there. It said warning. It said shark activity. It told them exactly what was in the water. Some of them read every word. Some of them took a picture of it. And then every single one of them walked straight past it and into the ocean. And every one of them was already dead. They just didn't know it yet. Let's start with a Brazilian student named Arthur Medici. It was September 15th, 2018. Newcomb Hollow Beach, Wellfleet, Massachusetts. The summer crowds had gone. And at the base of the stairs to the beach, the way they had been posted since June, the warning flags were there. Arthur Medici was 26 years old, a Brazilian student enrolled at Bridgewater State University, about 45 miles south of Boston. He had driven to Cape Cod that afternoon the way young people drive to beaches on long September weekends, because the weather was holding, because the drive was not long, because the water was still warm enough, because there was no compelling reason not to. He was not a trained diver. He was not a competitive swimmer. He was a young man on a bodyboard in the late afternoon surf of a public beach, doing exactly what public beaches exist to let people do. The summer of 2018 had been different on Cape Cod, and not privately. The gray seal population on the Outer Cape had been growing for 2 decades. The Marine Mammal Protection Act had worked exactly as designed, and gray seals are the primary prey of large adult great white sharks. The Cape Cod National Seashore had been posting purple shark flags at every beach under its jurisdiction since June. Each flag had a companion sign with specific guidance. Stay close to shore, avoid swimming near seal colonies, exit the water if you see a fin. The Atlantic White Shark Conservancy had been tagging and tracking white sharks in those waters for years and releasing its data publicly. The information was not obscure, it was on signs, it was in the local paper. It was the ongoing story of that stretch of coastline all summer. William Linton, a physician, had been attacked by a great white at Long Nook Beach in Truro, 3 miles north on the same coastline, 6 weeks earlier. He had survived, and the story had been national news. The flags and signs posted at Newcomb Hollow on September 15th were the same flags and signs that had been posted at Long Nook on July 30th. Medici was bodyboarding in shallow water, not near the seal colony, not deep, not doing anything the advisory guidelines said not to do, when the attack happened. The failure here is not his. Not a lapse in judgment, not a dismissed warning, not recklessness looking for an outcome to match it. The failure is the gap between what the signs can promise and what they actually guarantee. The signs said, reduce your risk. They said, don't go near the seals, stay close to shore, get out if you see a fin. They did not say, because no sign can say this honestly, that following these guidelines makes you safe. That is not what they said, and that is not what following them delivers. A great white shark hunting gray seals in 2 to 3 feet of surf does not distinguish a bodyboarder in a dark wetsuit from the seal it is searching for in the seconds between detection and strike. The attack profile, fast, from below, a single lateral strike, is identical in both cases. The shark was not confused. It was executing a prey capture sequence that has worked in exactly these conditions for millions of years. I want to stop here for a moment because this detail changes what kind of story this is. Medici was not ignoring the warnings. He was following them as well as a recreational swimmer in a public place reasonably can. The shark found him anyway. In the shallows at the edge of a beach he had every right to use. The signs were there. The flags were correct. The information they contained was accurate about the risk, but structurally unable to make the risk zero. Before we go on, we are closing in on 1,000 subscribers on this channel. When we cross that mark, we are giving away a $100 Amazon gift card to one randomly selected subscriber. No entry form, no comment required. Nothing to do except already be subscribed when we hit it. We will reach out directly. Back to Cape Cod. The great white shark, Carcharodon carcharias, is the largest predatory fish on the planet. Adults in the Cape Cod corridor typically run between 12 and 16 feet, males and subadults drawn by the gray seal population, mature females tending to remain further offshore. The bite force of a large great white is estimated at around 4,000 pounds per square inch, force sufficient to cut through a bicycle frame in a single application. And the hunting mechanism in seal habitat is a single high-velocity strike from below, not the sustained hold associated with bull or tiger sharks. The animal strikes, releases, and withdraws to a distance. The logic is to wound prey large enough to injure back, allow blood loss to do the rest, and return when resistance has stopped. The strike hit Medici from below, catching his right leg at mid-thigh. The femoral artery runs through that section of the leg, one of the largest vessels in the human body, carrying blood volume fast enough that uncontrolled hemorrhage can become fatal within minutes. The water around him turned red immediately. Bystanders on the beach saw it happen and reached him at the waterline. People worked to stop the bleeding with whatever was at hand. Emergency services were called. A medical helicopter was dispatched. He was alive when he reached the beach. The people around him did everything right. The injury was the problem, and the injury did not wait. Arthur Medici was pronounced dead before the helicopter could get him to a trauma center. He was 26 years old. He was the first person killed by a great white shark in Massachusetts in 82 years. Cape Cod National Seashore Rangers closed Newcomb Hollow immediately. The Atlantic White Shark Conservancy's tracking data for the weeks surrounding the attack documented multiple tagged white sharks in the corridor where Medici was bodyboarding. Not one dangerous animal that could be identified and removed, but a population of predators using that water for exactly the purpose the flags had been posted to warn about. There is no footage of the attack. The Cape Cod National Seashore does not maintain underwater surveillance cameras, and whatever was captured on the phones of bystanders who responded to a dying man on a beach became part of an active emergency response scene handled by Barnstable County law enforcement and National Park Service rangers. A scene that was cleared and secured before any of it was publishable, and that has never been in public circulation. The signs had been accurate. The closures had been appropriate. The flags were the correct flag, in the correct color at the base of the correct path. And the information they contained was accurate about a coastline with apex predators in it, not about a coastline where the predators had been removed. The next case is the warning that should have landed 6 weeks before Medici died. It happened 3 miles north on the same stretch of coast, to a physician who understood in clinical detail exactly what was happening to his own body while it was happening. It was July 30th, 2018. Long Nook Beach, Truro, Massachusetts. 6 weeks and 17 days before Arthur Medici died, 3 miles north on the same stretch of outer Cape coastline, at a beach with the same shark advisory flags posted at the same parking lot. William Linton was a physician, a neurologist in his mid-60s. He had come to Cape Cod the way people who have summered there for years come, on a familiar schedule in familiar water, with the accumulated ease of a person who has done this before. He was not reckless. He was not a novice in the ocean. He was exactly the kind of person who, by any ordinary calculus, knows how to evaluate what he is getting into. The purple shark flags at Long Nook Beach had been running since June. The reasoning behind them was publicly communicated, and not particularly technical. The gray seal population on the Cape had grown, the great whites had followed the seals, and the water people swam in was the same water the sharks were using. The warning was accurate. There was nothing ambiguous about what the flags meant. The failure here is one that almost no precautionary system can eliminate, and it is worth naming precisely, because it is not a failure of intelligence or of access to information. Every time a person swims in water posted with a warning and returns without incident, they accumulate a data point. The data point is technically true. If they swam, nothing happened, they came back out. What it does not measure is whether the risk was absent or whether they simply were not where the shark was that day. Those two things feel identical from the inside. They produce the same outcome, a safe swim. And over time, a succession of safe swims in flagged water does not make the flag feel more relevant. It makes it feel less. A great white, estimated from the bite characteristics at between 12 and 14 feet, struck Linton in the left leg from below without warning. No surface fin visible, no disturbance from the beach, no interval between the moment the shark was beneath him and the moment the jaws closed. His instinct was to push against it. He shoved his hands toward the animal's head. The shark released his leg and, in the same motion, bit down on his right hand, catching the palm in 2 fingers. He punched it. A neurologist in his 60s in the water, with a great white's jaws on his hand, hit the shark in the nose with his free fist. The response every attack survival manual recommends. The one most people who read it believe will remain hypothetical. For Linton, it was not hypothetical. The shark released. He reached the shore. His leg required emergency surgery. His hand required multiple operations, including tendon repair. He survived. I want to stop on something William Linton said afterward, because it is the most important sentence in this case. When asked about the warning flags posted at Long Nook Beach all summer, he did not deny he had seen them. He said he had made a judgment about the risk. He is a physician. He was making a rational assessment based on available evidence. The evidence was the same evidence that everyone else at Cape Cod beaches that summer had access to. And the decision he made was the same decision hundreds of thousands of people made that season without consequence. 6 weeks after Linton's survival story ran in every newspaper in New England, Arthur Medici drove to Newcomb Hollow Beach and went into the water. The flags were the same flags. The coastline was the same coastline. Here's what I want you to understand about those 6 weeks. Linton's survival became the story. The headline was, "Man attacked by shark, survived." The punch, the medical professionalism with which he described his own injuries, the fact that he had fought back and made it out. That was the narrative the coverage chose because it was remarkable and because it was hopeful. The flag was in the background of every photograph. Nobody's eyes went to the flag. There is no footage of the attack on William Linton from the water. Long Nook Beach is accessed by a path that descends steep dunes, and the sightlines from the beach to a swimmer 50 yards out are limited by the wave energy and the angle. Whatever was captured on any device by any bystander that afternoon was collected by Massachusetts Environmental Police and National Park Service law enforcement as part of an active incident investigation. Standard procedure for a shark attack on federal land that resulted in serious injury, and has not been in public circulation. The water cleared. The beach was closed. He gave interviews from a hospital bed and from recovery, not from the waterline. The next case moved to the other side of the world. It happened in a city where the last fatal shark attack in those same waters had been almost 60 years before. A stretch of time long enough that the absence of fatalities had become, in the minds of the people who swam there, something indistinguishable from safety. February 16, 2022, Little Bay Beach, Sydney, New South Wales, Australia. Simon Nellist was 35 years old, a British-born man who had lived in Sydney long enough that it was simply where he lived. He worked as a scuba diving instructor. He was training that morning for a charity open water swim, one of those events with a registration page and a fundraising target that turns regular fitness training into something with a calendar date attached, which makes it harder to skip even when the morning is cold and the water is dark. He was a competent and experienced open water swimmer. He knew Sydney's coastline well enough to be training in it before sunrise on a Wednesday. Sydney's relationship with shark safety is specific and well documented. Since 1937, the New South Wales government has maintained shark nets, large meshed barriers installed seasonally at ocean beaches, at most of the city's popular swimming spots. The nets are not enclosures. They do not seal the water, but they are actively maintained. The history behind them is real, and they had produced by 22, nearly 60 years without a fatal shark attack anywhere in Sydney waters. Little Bay Beach is south of the main harbor beaches. It does not have shark nets. It is quieter, smaller, and the coastal headland above it provides the kind of walking track with cliff views that Sydney's geography produces in a handful of places around the city. People swim there. People have always swum there. Here is the failure stated plainly. Sydney has shark nets. Sydney has gone nearly 60 years without a fatal shark attack. Little Bay is in Sydney. Therefore, Little Bay is safe. Every step of that reasoning is understandable. The conclusion does not follow. The nets at the managed beaches protect those beaches. They do not change what is in the water at a beach that does not have them. 60 years without a fatal attack in Sydney waters is a description of the last 60 years, not a guarantee about the 61st. But the 60-year record does not feel like a statistic when you live in the city. It feels like the place you live. Nellist was approximately 100 meters offshore in open water, in conditions that a scuba diving instructor in training for an ocean swim handles without particular caution when the attack happened. The people on the coastal path above the beach saw it happen. Witnesses described the water being disturbed, turning red, and then Nellist not being there. The white shark responsible was estimated by researchers based on physical evidence recovered at the scene at between 14 and 16 feet. I want to be direct about what fatal means in the context of a large white shark attack at 100 meters offshore in early morning water. The proximity to shore that allows intervention in some cases did not apply here. The people on the path called emergency services the moment they understood what they were seeing. Police Marine Area Command, ambulance, and the Coast Guard all responded. There was nothing for them to reverse by the time they arrived. The injuries were incompatible with survival, and 100 meters of cold water at 7 in the morning is not a setting where the window for intervention is measured in comfortable units of time. Here is the quiet detail in this case. The closure signs went up at Little Bay Beach on February 16, 2022. They were not there on February 15th. Simon Nellist went into water at a beach that had never had closure signs, in a city that had not had a fatal shark attack in his lifetime, in a country with one of the more sophisticated shark safety systems in the world, and he was the first fatality in Sydney in nearly 60 years because the gap in that system was exactly the size of one unnetted beach on a Wednesday morning in February. There is no footage of the attack. The witnesses on the path above the beach were at an elevation and distance that produced a view of the water, not of the event in any form that could be described as usable. NSA's Police Marine Area Command cleared the water, secured the scene, and opened an active fatality investigation, the standard process for an unexplained death in a public place, which pulls anything from witnesses into an evidence chain that is not in public circulation. The attack itself happened at depth and at a surface water distance from the shore that no phone camera on a cliff path was capturing in resolution. Simon Nellist's death was the first fatal shark attack in Sydney in 59 years. The charity swim he had been training for was held in his memory. His fiancée, Jessie Ho, described him in the coverage afterward as someone who loved the ocean and had built his working life around it. His name is on a memorial near the beach. The next case is about a beach in California where this same question of what a warning sign actually protects against got answered twice, 2 years apart, by the same animal in the same water. October 22, 2010. Surf Beach, Santa Barbara County, California. Lucas Ransom was 19 years old, a second-year student at the University of California, Santa Barbara, about 45 minutes down the coast. He had driven out to Surf Beach on a free Thursday morning to go bodyboarding with a friend. 19 years old. Nothing to be anywhere until later. A beach he had visited before, the same kind of decision that produces the same kind of morning thousands of times every autumn along the California coast without outcome. The waters north of Point Conception, the headland that forms the northern shoulder of Santa Barbara County's coast, have one of the highest documented densities of great white sharks in the eastern Pacific. The cold water upwelling along that section of coastline supports the fish populations that draw northern elephant seals to haul out sites on the rocks, and northern elephant seals are the preferred prey of large adult great whites in California. The California Department of Fish and Wildlife maintained records of shark reports and activity along that corridor. The seasonal aggregation data had been in peer-reviewed marine science literature for years. Biologists who study white sharks in the eastern Pacific had characterized the pattern at Point Conception as one of the most reliable in the region. The animals are there in autumn, in numbers, for a documented biological reason. There was no sign at Surf Beach on October 22, 2010. That is the factual answer to the question of whether one was ignored. There was no sign because nobody had been attacked at Surf Beach before, and the warning infrastructure for California's shark risk in 2010 was built on incident history rather than ecological risk mapping. The science that would have predicted the risk existed. It was in academic journals and state databases. It was not translated into a sign at the parking lot. I want to sit with that for a moment. Lucas Ransom did not ignore a warning at Surf Beach. He went to a beach with no posted warning, in waters with documented apex predator activity, during the season when that activity peaks at that specific latitude, and no one had ever been killed there before. He had no way of knowing what he was walking toward beyond the general awareness, common to most California beachgoers, that great whites exist in California waters. The great white that attacked Ransom was, based on the bite evidence and the physical evidence on his equipment that investigators reconstructed afterward, an adult animal estimated at between 14 and 17 feet in length. The attack happened at the surface, in water between 5 and 8 feet deep, roughly 50 yards from shore. The shark struck from below. His friend was in the water nearby and watched it happen. He reached Ransom as fast as he could and helped get him toward shore. Bystanders on the beach responded. Emergency services were called. The injuries were catastrophic. The great white's single strike had caused damage that neither the people on the beach nor any trauma center at the distant Surf Beach requires could have reversed. Lucas Ransom died at the scene. He was 19 years old. He was the first person ever killed by a shark at Surf Beach. After Ransom's death, authorities closed the beach and posted warning signs at the parking area and along the path. Bright, standard format signage, yellow background, explicit language about documented white shark activity in the adjacent waters. Specific recommendations about what visitors should not do. Those signs were professionally maintained and clearly visible. They were still there 2 years later. That is the next case. 2 years, 1 month, and 17 days after Lucas Ransom was killed at Surf Beach, a recreational diver named Francisco Solorio Jr. drove to the same parking lot, walked past the same signs, and entered the same water. December 9th, 2012. Surf Beach, Santa Barbara County, California. A cold winter weekday, the Pacific the color of gunmetal, the kind of morning that belongs to people who know a specific stretch of water and have gear appropriate for it. The yellow warning signs posted after Lucas Ransom's death in 2010 were at the parking lot entrance and at the path to the beach. Both men who drove out that morning saw them. Francisco Solorio Jr. was an experienced recreational diver. Cold water abalone diving along the California coast is a specific practice with its own community, its own gear, its own seasonal patterns. People who know the access points, know where the abalone beds are, know the entry conditions at spots they return to regularly. He had come to Surf Beach with another diver the way people familiar with the stretch of coastline come back to it, because they know the place, because they know what it offers, because they have been there before and it has been fine. The warning signs at Surf Beach said, in explicit language, that great white sharks were documented in the adjacent waters, that the presence of marine mammals attracted large predators, and that swimmers and divers entered at their own risk. The signs were accurate. They had been accurate since the day they were posted 2 years earlier, because the ecological conditions that killed Lucas Ransom had not changed. The elephant seal haul-out sites north of Point Conception were still there. The seasonal aggregation of great whites was still documented. The water was the same water. I am not going to tell you that Francisco Solorio Jr. was reckless, because I do not think that is the accurate word for what happens when an experienced diver looks at a warning sign at a beach he knows and enters the water anyway. Recklessness implies the risk was obvious, and the decision was made in its teeth with full knowledge of what was coming. What I think actually happens, and what the evidence of this case, and the case before it, and the cases in this video consistently shows, is something more specific. A warning sign at a beach you have visited before tells you that the risk exists. What it cannot tell you is that this specific visit is the one where the risk collects. Every prior visit where you made the same decision and came out of the water generated a data point. The data point is real and technically true. You were here, nothing happened. But it measures your personal experience of the risk, not the presence or absence of the risk. Those are not the same thing, and they feel identical from the inside. Great white sharks in California's cold water abalone habitat work in a specific depth range. 20 to 30 feet, the water column where divers in dark wetsuits move slowly along rocky substrate, is not incidentally where white sharks hunt along this coastline. It is specifically where they hunt the large marine mammals that use those same depths. An abalone diver in a dark wetsuit moving along the bottom is not a seal, but the size profile, the depth, the movement pattern, and the thermal signature are a closer match to the shark's prey model than to anything it has learned to associate with non-prey in those waters. The attack on Francisco Solorio Jr. happened at depth. His diving companion surfaced and raised the alarm as fast as he could. The Coast Guard and emergency services responded to the scene. Francisco Solorio Jr. was recovered from the water and pronounced dead at the scene. He was the second person killed at Surf Beach, 2 years apart. The same signs at the same parking lot, the same species, the same water. There is no footage. An underwater attack in 20 to 30 feet of cold Pacific produces no surface event for anyone on shore to record, and a diving partner surfacing to call for help does not surface with a camera running. Whatever the Coast Guard documented when they reached the scene is part of a law enforcement and coroner's record, not public material. After Solorio's death, Surf Beach was closed again, and the existing warning signage was reinforced and updated to include specific language about the history of fatal attacks at that location. Today, Surf Beach carries signage that references both deaths by name and date. The beach remains open because it is public coastal access land and because the state of California does not permanently close public coastline in response to shark incidents. People still swim there. People still dive there. They walk past the signs on the way to the water, the same way every person in this video did. The final case is about what happens when the warning infrastructure works perfectly, reaches everyone it was designed to reach, functions exactly as built, and still does not cover a stretch of coastline where a surfer drives specifically to get away from the beaches with infrastructure on them. July 14, 2012, Wedge Island, Western Australia, a remote beach roughly 90 miles north of Perth. Ben Linden was 24 years old. The people who knew him described him the way people describe someone who built a life around surfing, that the ocean was where he was most himself, that he had been doing this since he was a kid, that driving out to a remote break before sunrise was not a burden, but part of what made a good day a good day. He had come to Wedge Island with friends on a winter morning to surf the break, the same way he had come before, the same way surfers have always come to places like Wedge Island. Western Australia's coastline in the winter of 2012 was in a condition the state government had been publicly calling a crisis for months. 2011 had produced 5 fatal shark attacks in Western Australian waters, 5 in a single year, in a state that had averaged under 1 per year over the previous 2 decades. The government had convened emergency reviews of shark mitigation policy. The debates about drumlines, netting, and the ethics of culling had been running in every newspaper in Perth for months. The Department of Fisheries had built and was actively maintaining the SharkSmart platform, a real-time shark alert system using tagged shark tracking data, aerial beach patrols, and coastal monitoring to push warnings to registered users via text message. Surfers and swimmers who signed up received alerts when tagged animals were detected near monitored areas. The system was functional, publicly promoted, and in active use. Here is the failure, and it is different from every other failure in this video. The SharkSmart system worked. It reached the people who registered at the managed beaches where monitoring infrastructure existed. It sent the right alerts at the right times. It was a genuinely well-designed early warning response to a coastline emergency that nobody had a previous playbook for. Wedge Island is not a managed beach. There is no monitoring infrastructure at the end of a four-wheel drive track through scrub with no facilities and no parking lot. The SharkSmart platform was built on the assumption of beach access. A sign at an entry point, an alert to a registered phone number, a patrol aircraft covering a mapped section of monitored coastline. It was built for the places where people cluster. It was not built for the place you specifically drive to in order to leave all of that behind. What a surfer who drives to a remote break on the Western Australian coast in the winter of 2012, in the middle of a documented statewide shark attack crisis, is implicitly deciding is that the risk at an unmanaged remote beach is different in kind from the risk at the managed beaches the warnings were designed for. The evidence supporting that is the accumulated history of surfing that break without consequence. The evidence against it is the statistical reality of what was happening on that entire coastline during that specific season, and the fact that the absence of a warning sign is not the same as the absence of what the warning sign is for. The great white that attacked Ben Linden in the break at Wedge Island was estimated by witnesses who were in the water nearby and by investigators who later reviewed the physical evidence at no less than 14 feet in length, possibly larger. The attack happened in the surf line, where the wave energy and whitewater create the visual conditions in which large great whites hunt most effectively. Enough surface movement to mask an approach, the right depth for a strike from below. His companions were close enough to see what happened. They were not close enough to do anything in the time the attack left. Ben Linden did not survive. The drive along the four-wheel drive track to Wedge Island meant that the distance from any medical facility was not measured in minutes the body had available. His friends flagged down a vessel offshore. Emergency services were contacted by every available means in an area with limited coverage. The response came as fast as the access road and the geography allowed. Here's the detail that carries the most weight in this case, and it is not about Ben Linden specifically. It is about the SharkSmart system that Western Australia had built. The system was real. It was well designed. It used actual tagged shark tracking data to push real-time location alerts to people in the water. In the period following the attacks of 2011 and 2012, it was cited in emergency management literature as one of the more functional attempts anywhere in the world to build early warning infrastructure for apex predator activity at coastal scale. It reached people at managed beaches. It functioned exactly as it was supposed to function. The alert that would have needed to reach Ben Linden on July 14th, 2012 did not have a delivery mechanism. There was no registered user at the end of a dirt track. There was no sign to post. There was no parking lot. There was a beach and the ocean and the same unresolvable gap between a warning system and a coastline that is always, in the end, larger than the system built around it. Ben Linden was 24 years old. His death was the sixth fatal shark attack in Western Australian waters in under 2 years. It is referenced in the government records and in the academic literature from that period as part of the sequence of events that led to the controversial shark drum line trial that Western Australia launched in 2014, a program designed to extend protective infrastructure to open coastline that was not covered by managed beach systems, shut down and revised multiple times over the years that followed in the ongoing argument about what an ocean coastline actually is versus what any system can be built to cover. The sign at the top of the path is not the same as safety. It is the beginning of a negotiation between a warning system and a coastline that never agreed to stay inside it. I have covered a lot of cases in this series. The ones that stay with me longest are not always the most dramatic. They are the ones where the information existed, the warning was accurate, the sign was posted, and the gap was somewhere else entirely between the sign and the moment the decision got made. If you want to keep going, there is another one on the screen right now.